Gavin here from UltimateReloader.com. I'm back at Area 419 with Craig Arnzen. Craig, thank you for having me out.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, so I'm excited about this video.
Yep.
You guys make scope mounts, you make scope rings. And so I think you're a pretty good person to talk to about what are some of the common questions, what are some of the common issues, and what's your end-to-end process for mounting a scope.
So my fundamental thought when it comes to how are we making these, how do we mount it, how does it all need to work, is the core job of your rings or your one-piece mount or whatever it is to hold the optic as securely as possible without causing any damage to the rifle. It's very simple in theory, but sometimes that execution can be difficult. So, we'll walk through. We chose rings to do this specifically because there's a little more nuance to it, as they're two separate parts.
Yes.
As opposed to a one-piece mount, which is basically just an exercise in torque. But I'm going to go through this, and we'll talk through some common things. The first thing I'm going to do, and this is something that Hockenspur is a guy that I know, I respect the heck out of Hocken. He's a very bright guy, and he talks often about wet mounting optics. And what that means is using some sort of lubricant, grease, whatever, on these grabbing surfaces, because most torque in a setting like this is lost to friction.
Right.
What a screw does when you crank down on it is it creates clamping force in the direction you're squeezing. But whatever you're squeezing onto, if it's not lubricated or smooth, you're basically just binding and slipping over.
Yeah.
So even just a real thin layer of like a heavy oil or a light grease, we're not sponsored by Pro Gold, Pro Shot, any of that. We just use the crap out of it. We use a lot of it.
We use TW25B, which is an amazing lubricant for muzzle threads, for, breech threads, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Tenon threads.
You got to have a good grease that you use often. So my first step in this process is I basically just sit the rings down somewhere. Okay. Picked a spot. Doesn't matter a lot where they are, but they're somewhere in the middle.
One moment. Does it matter which way the screws are facing? Assuming a 0 MOA set of rings.
No.
Okay.
I like them being on the non-ejection port side of the action because I feel like there's more cleanliness over here, clean workspace.
Okay.
It doesn't really matter. Now, all of our rings are serialized to where you have part A, B, C, and D. A goes with B, C goes with D. They don't have to be in order. They can be. They were inline board, so they're going to be straight to one another. But I like the cap with the base, even though the way these are made in sets, you should be able to swap them back and forth.
And what's the product name for these rings specifically?
This is our match scope ring.
Okay.
We also have a hunt scope ring, which is a little bit narrower and lighter, and then we've got our tactical one-piece mounts in kind of a standard, a mid cantilever, and a full cantilever style. So we've got a whole family there.
Yep.
But the rings are the one that I like to show mounting because there's a little more nuance to a ring.
And we've got pins here. Talk about those real quick.
These are here to help guide the caps down square onto the optic.
Okay.
Something different in the way that we make our mounts and rings is we are final boring the inside surface at the end. So as you can see here, that's a raw aluminum finish. We totally make all of the parts, the bases, the grabbers, the caps. And when we make the bases of the rings and the caps, we leave material on the inside. We send them out to not anodize, bring them back, fully reassemble them, and then inline bore them as sets. The rings, because they're obviously separate parts, are then zip tied together as they come off the machine, taken back to the laser, serialized in sets so that all of these parts were made together and are round and true and square to one another.
So I can think of two reasons why that would be advantageous. One is the clamping force, contact, and then the lack of distortion. Obviously, if you distort the tube of the scope, it's not going to come back to the same place. It can damage the scope. It's not going to function properly. It's not going to look properly.
In a ring or a mount's contacting two things. One, the optic, and two, your receiver.
Yep.
Your optic is less robust than your receiver. Your optic's made out of aluminum and filled with glass.
Quite a bit less robust.
Yes. Your action is a hunk of steel.
It's like a tank and an egg.
Exactly. So, if you're riding on a tank holding an egg, I'm less worried about what part of the tank I'm standing on and more worried about how I'm holding the egg.
That's
what's happening here.
And you're changing my thinking on this, right? I mean, the lube and this whole looking at the torque of the scope caps before the cross bolts. It's a different way of thinking about it, but it does make sense.
You and I we've talked about scope or rifle bedding.
Sure.
And trying to get to stress free.
Yes.
we want a stress-free mount on your optic, because let's not stress your optic. There's, again, a dozen pieces of glass in this thing. There are things that need to be able to move. You don't want pressure and distortion. So I'm more interested in having a really nice zero stress hold on the optic.
Yep.
And then at the end, we'll tighten the rings for the receiver, and it's going to be fine.
So then the raw aluminum also gives you a higher coefficient of friction, correct?
Yes.
Between the ring surfaces and the tube body?
So you put anodize on aluminum because it makes it harder. It adds kind of a hard candy shell, like an M&M. That hard external protects the soft chocolate.
Right.
Well, the hard external of anodize protects the marginally softer, 70-75. We want the contact surface against the optic to be softer. The reason for that is we would rather wear and time on one another damage the rings than the optic. This optic is $3,000.
Right.
Those rings are $200. The gap is real. So if one of these parts has to take wear over time, you obviously want to be the less expensive one. Also, it being a tiny bit softer allows, when you clamp down and when you grab onto that optic, for there to be at a very small level a bit of squish or grab of that ring onto that optic.
And you can feel that when you try and remove the scope from these rings. It's like sucked in, literally.
All I did was set this optic down,
right?
And it doesn't want to turn. It's going to walk the rings around because they're tight before anything goes anywhere.
So it's not going to slip. That's one of the key points, right? We're not distorting the optic, but we're also going to maintain that position that we set it at.
An example of this is like one of those silicone pads you can buy and put your phone on it or whatever, and it sticks to it.
Sure.
Silicone is not sticky. It is just very, very smooth. And that real smoothness and softness, similar to a raw internal of an optic ring, is grabbing onto your phone and keeping it from sliding.
Yep.
Well, it's grabbing onto your optic. So we are getting grip and retention without pressure.
Yep.
And that's enormously important.
Makes sense.
We've talked to optics manufacturers that have told us crazy things, like 80% of their warranty claims come from inappropriate mounting. People are using too much torque to try to keep the thing from going anywhere.
Right.
Well, that same organization was very excited when we made these. Like, dude, can we get some? It's like, yeah, absolutely. So all I've done, I put the rings on the action somewhere pseudo appropriate.
Okay.
I put the optic in it, and now I can sit here and get a little bit of where I want this optic to be. So a best practice for doing this, and this is not actually going to work because we're indoors and there's a wall 7 feet away from us. But, get down here, eyes closed, get on the gun, open my eyes, and at full power, is it the right distance back and forth?
For a natural head position.
Yes. Up and down, I'm going to adjust with a cheek piece.
Sure.
But, I'm
fore
closing
aft.
my eyes, I'm getting on this thing, I'm opening them, and it's a good distance. At full magnification, I can see the entire sight picture without having the shadows moving in around the edges.
Yep. And the reason to do that is as you back off on your magnification, that eye box gets more forgiving.
Yes,
right?
Your least forgiving eye box is at full magnification. And, I suggest set this up based on how you're going to be shooting. If you're an F-class guy and you're prone all the time, make sure it's prone.
Right.
If you are a hunter that's, you're shooting coyotes or rock chucks or whatever they are, and you're standing off of a tripod all the time, set it up standing off a tripod.
Yep.
If you're shooting PRS style and you're in various positions, get in various positions and set this up. This is a one-time thing, and the difference in a 1/4 inch forwards and backwards can make quite a bit of difference.
Oh, absolutely.
So what I know is this thing's basically in the right place. I'm actually going to move this ring one lug forward because I want to get them as far away from one another as I can.
We talked about the rings, but we didn't really talk a whole lot about the height. Tell me, in terms of the objective to fore end or barrel clearance, and then also in terms of cheek riser, where you like a scope to be at.
This optic is something like a 1/4 inch off the barrel. It's about as close as I care to have them. In a world where most of the stocks or chassis that I'm personally going to use have adjustment here, it's there to be used. Now, if you're on a fixed cheek stock, Mayor's EH or something, or a
hunting rifle.
Yeah, hunting rifle. Then you need to kind of play that game in height and try to make it all sync up. But
so that might even affect what scope you go with, right?
Sure.
You might go with the 50 rather than 56 because it just feels better at the appropriate height.
You got to
right?
slam it.
Yeah.
You've got high cheekbones like a statue.
Right.
So you're pretty far down. You need the optic to be pretty far down. If you're not, and you sit on it different, or you're a person that doesn't want to be riding high up in the cheek, but you like it down on your chin, that's a personal preference item. But about 1/4 inch is all the closer I like the optic to be to the barrel if I have adjustment. The reason for that is, when you shoot and you warm this thing up, right? Shooting match settings, you're shooting 10 plus rounds in a short period of time and doing that on a repeat, you start to get heat and mirage off your barrel.
Yep.
Having a little bit of space
more
between
forgiveness.
that can help.
Yep.
You don't want mirage distortion off your barrel and your optic or off your suppressor or whatever that is. So, this kind of 1/4 inch spot is an okay starting point. If you've got a little more than that, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, you'll oftentimes see on the internet people mounting optics that are just preposterously high, crazy high. And the real downside to that typically comes from not being able to get a good cheek weld.
Right.
There's also the mechanical nature of if the further your optical center line is from your bore line, the more opportunity there is for cant to have you off target.
Right.
That's a whole nother video, a different hornet's nest to kick.
Yep.
But in general, make sure you have a fair amount of clearance. You don't need to slam it. You don't need to be, with your caps 10 thousandths off your barrel. No crazy stuff like that. Have a little space. Don't go crazy. If you have adjustable cheeks.
Yep. Now, when we talk height numbers, where are we referencing from on the bottom and where are we referencing from on the top for the Area 419 rings?
Almost every manufacturer of rings and mounts in the game is going to measure in a fashion that is from this point, which is where basically the top of the Picatinny to the center line of the optic.
Yep.
That is not an Area 419 choice. That's pretty industry standard. That's what people are doing. We wanted to stay along those lines. We don't need some proprietary
so
measurement
you can
system.
compare apples to apples. Oh, it's a .936 or whatever that number is, right? I know what that means for my rifle. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So that all works, and we actually did a cool video, and we can link to it. How we use dimes or pennies, and we stack to figure out what our minimum clearance is, and we show you how to do the math.
Oh, cool.
And minimum clearance is minimum clearance. You can always add a little bit. Probably don't want to subtract.
Right.
But it gets us there. So I move this ring one pick lug forward because I know that I can. I know where the optic was relative, and you can mark this with silver Sharpie if you feel so inclined. But I knew where my spot erector housing to rear cap was.
Yep.
So this is basically where this optic's going to go. The next step here is I like to take these rings, make sure they're pushed forward. So I'm just getting to snug, just to where they're touching.
Yeah.
And then from there I might even back off just a touch. I want these rings to be able to move a very small amount during the next step.
Okay.
So, we're...
This might not be what you're expecting.
You're right. Right. This is... We've done this before in install videos.
Yeah.
Not everybody's watched them. They should have. So I'm to snug and back off just a touch.
Okay.
So those rings have a little bit of wobble and play to them. Again, the mating is about the optic. So now I'm going to come in with my rings. This is part D, which means the C. So this is A. It goes with B. I'm just setting those down.
A with B, C with D.
Yep. Serial numbers on the same side.
Okay.
Now I'm going to grab a torque limiter. We say go down 18 inch-pounds on the top. I've got my 15 inch-pound fix-it stick. And I'm going to slowly take that down until it just barely touches. This guy till it just barely touches. And now comes the level. Now, if we were to do this, we would set up and make sure this was perfectly level. We'd put a plumb bob at distance. And
Get your reticle level.
Yep, and then I would level the y-axis.
Yep.
To a plumb line.
Yep.
We'll call that level for the sake of video. And now I'm just going to take all these to a basic snug, just barely starting to touch anything in an X pattern.
Are you looking at gaps on either side, or are these pins? Okay.
We will. The pins keep things pretty straight here.
Nice.
And again, I'm not applying torque to anything. I'm mostly just running screws down.
Yep.
And now we're gonna look at gaps. So I'm gonna look at side to side. I can see how much pin I'm seeing basically on each side.
Yep.
So I know this side's just a touch higher. Take that down. See how much I can see on both sides. These are fairly even. So we'll slowly start taking things and walking them into torque. There we go. There's that one. That one. 3, 4. Now we will repeat up front.
Just like you're torquing down a cylinder head on an engine, huh?
Yep.
Some sort of pattern, yeah. It's simple when it's four screws.
Right, and the more you add, the more complex it gets. All right, so we've got torque all the way around. You feel you still have a little play here.
Yep.
But what we know is these rings are making complete stress-free contact on the optic
with the
now.
tube. Yeah.
And since we snugged these at the bottom, we know they're going to remain square as well. Now I'm going to the...
So I have done this method by accident.
Okay.
Because I had forgotten the cross bolts.
Yeah.
You know?
That happens. And now that I've got those done, 45 inch-pounds, crank it down, and we have a mounted optic.
Awesome.
That's what there is to it. Again, we are stress-free mounting on the optic, and then if there's a little stress in the mounting, it's in the receiver.
Down there.
The receiver can handle it.
Yep.
The optic, we don't want it to have to.
And with everything level still, we could throw our bubble on.
Sure.
And get that level at the same time.
I actually like, if I'm going to attach a bubble to the optic, if it's one of the ring styles, I do that first. I put it as far forward and unobstructed as I can. And we've got optics here with, ring or tube mount levels that have been on there for years and years on different rifles, because once that level shows to the y-axis, level's level. Go put it on whatever you want. And in this situation, if everything's level and we feel good about it, this is when we attach one of our fixed levels to the match mounting points. We put that on if we'd like. Or at this point, if you feel really good about it, you want to put a send it level on and calibrate it to this is level, and remember you can do that as well.
Very cool. Thank you very much for guiding us through the process. I think we hit a lot of the basic questions there. My question for you is, do you have other questions? Do you have lingering things that you're wondering about mounting a scope? Or is this different fundamentally from how you mount a scope? Drop that comment and we'll start a discussion. And if you do want to know more about these match rings, other rings like the hunting rings and or the mounts, click on that first link in the video description. In the article, we'll have all of the appropriate links to the product pages and so on and so forth. Thank you, Craig.
Yeah,
this was a lot of fun.
I think so.
That concludes this video, and that means it's time to wrap it up. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, we're on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, where we've got unrestricted content, and Instagram. Make sure to follow us on all those channels. Ultimate Reloader also has a commercial solutions division serving law enforcement, the military, and the gun industry. We have some unique capabilities, including a comprehensive suite of recoil testing and evaluation capabilities, trigger profiling, and more. If you're interested in custom rifles like what we build here on the channel or gunsmithing services, you're going to want to go to rifles.ultimatereloader.com and get on the wait list. Thanks again for watching.